It's called a CH-46, and that's the A model, and which is what I flew in Nam. It was the Marine Corps' medium helicopter. The Marine used that like the Army used the Huey. We did just about everything with that. We did resupplies, we did medevacs, we did troop inserts, and then we also did what's called recon inserts and extracts, inserting teams of about 5 to 6 Marines, recon people that we called familiar as snake eaters, and then extract them also. And then we did like little overflights sometime for recon.
Okay.
Reconnaissance.
How many, or how big was the crew on this?
The crew on this, a normal crew was 4. We'd have a gunner, a crew chief, pilot, and co-pilot.
Okay.
And then sometimes, if we were designated purely for medevacs, we would have a corpsman on us, but a lot of our medevacs was on-the-spot type stuff.
A call comes in. How long would it take you to get from the base to wherever you needed to go on a sort of a standard day-by-day kind of mission?
If it was an emergency, like a regular resupply, this type troops and stuff and things, we had our briefing and everything, and it'd be a while. But if it's like, or even on recon inserts and extracts, but if it was an emergency, let's say a recon team had made contact, which they weren't supposed to be, and they were in the danger of being overran. Mm-hmm. From the time if we were at the base, a lot of times we were already out flying. But if we were like at Marble Mountain, we could be on location probably less than 15 minutes, mm-hmm. unless it was really close to the Laotian border.
Yeah.
But we could be there pretty quick.
That's from you or in your hooch or whatever you call it.
The ready room.
The ready room,
right.
The call comes, you get in the helo, and you're on the ground there in 15 minutes.
And then if it's like medevacs and stuff, like a lot of times we would be doing other jobs, and everybody would monitor what's called Da Nang dash. And if they had, one of the ground pounders would have an emergency medevac and stuff, they would call up and you could hear it and go, and you'd say, I'm close, I can go, type stuff. And then you're only talking from the time they initiated their call to you were down picking them up, sometimes, like 5 minutes. Sometimes it was longer than that.
Right, yeah.
But, so everybody monitored guard and Da Nang dash, and you heard the call come up, whoever was there, they would take it and go with it.
Yeah. Now, was your job, when you're on the ground there, in I Corps, you're based at south of Da Nang, Marble mm-hmm. Mountain there, 7-day-a-week job?
Flying wise, I would say we probably flew 5 days a week. Okay. But you had what's called a collateral job. My job, everybody had a job on the ground and stuff, and my job was what's called line officer. And as a line officer, I had all the up aircraft and all the crews, the gunners and crew chiefs under me. And so, but I had a very good gunny sergeant, and I would say, you got it,
Hand it to him, yeah.
Yeah, and my deal was, I said, if you keep them off my back, I'll keep them off your back. Mm-hmm. And it was very good. Got to work with the crew chiefs and the gunners very, very close that mm-hmm. way, mm-hmm. and good group of people. Did
you have the same team pretty consistently?
No. The crew chiefs had their own aircraft. The crew chiefs did. Okay. We never flew with the same aircraft.
Oh, okay.
So, you go in the morning, if you look at the board, okay, you got such and such aircraft, such and such as a co-pilot, and then on the aircraft you knew who the crew chief was going to be because of that. You wouldn't necessarily always have the same gunner either.
Oh, wow.
So the bird was, even though we signed for the bird, it was the crew chief's bird.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. It sounds like kind of the...
Yeah, and the crew chiefs would have a little talk with you if you abused their bird.
Really? And they would be E5 maybe, something?
Some of them were
E5?
some of them was like Lance Corporal, which would be, I think, an E3. Okay. I'm not too sure about that one.
Yeah.
These guys, we had, they were smart. We had one guy, Harrigan, was he had had 3 years at the University of Harvard and just went and joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
We had several like that. And they had to be pretty smart. They had to be smarter than we were because they had to know all the systems of the bird and how to work on it and everything.
Yeah.
And it's pretty complicated. The 46 or any helicopter is a pretty complicated piece of machinery. But it's a cruiser, a super cruiser that they had over there for naval support, artillery support for the grunts. And I don't know if we were taking some personnel out there or what we were, but they only had room for one bird at a time to land. And so it's like all tourists, I was snapping pictures.
Yeah. And so when that helo takes off, then likely you're gonna go in and do whatever the job is.
Yeah.
We see the guns there on the ship is that's the sort of thing that would be used for naval artillery support when the Marines call in.
Exactly. The New Jersey battleship was there at that time. And that thing could lob Volkswagen-sized shells 25, 26 miles. And so that was their, they would do that a lot. They would call that in because it would do wonders.
Sure. So an example of Navy and Marines.
And I don't know what size guns those are on there, but but the Navy gave a lot of artillery support.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're flying about 5 days a week. Was there any of those days where you didn't have any flying missions, or did you have some kind of flying mission?
Well, like I said,
every day you could
almost
fly,
every day, but there was sometimes weather-wise you
okay.
could not fly, like mainly through the monsoon season where it's just completely everything's socked in. But we would try. I mean, there would be a lot of times we would launch and we would try to fly. If it was if it was a just a normal resupply and stuff and things, with the weather winds. But if you had a team out there that was in trouble, or if you had emergency medevacs and stuff, if there was any way possible, you would try for it. And sometimes you could win, sometimes you didn't.
Yeah, meaning the weather would be too intense and you just couldn't get through.
Yeah, well, you just couldn't see. I mean, it's.
Oh right, you just can't. Just can't see what you're doing. You were in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive, which of course is remembered as kind of the big event, right, of the Vietnam War, and you were there during that time. Do you remember the Tet Offensive as being an especially intense time? Is that the way it felt to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. How
so? We kind of had a feeling that something was coming up, just from some reports from the recon teams, just general stuff. So it was kind of like, don't let your guard down, type stuff. And it was like early in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, they started hitting marble. They hit everywhere simultaneously, and they were hitting us very, very hard. We were out there with red lens flashlights trying to pre-flight our aircraft because we were getting calls immediately for medevacs and resupplies everywhere. I think I flew something like 17, 18 hours that day.
Wow. This is January 31, 68, when the first day of Tet.
Yes. Yeah. And everybody was doing that. Don't me. It was just that was the norm.
Wow.
And so we knew something a little bit different, and the intensity of it. And then we started hearing the reports of where it was coming in from all over. And then, of course, Quezon had been going on for a while. The siege of Quezon had already been going on for a while, and that intensified. Hue Citadel, that's when they came into Hue and overran Hue. And so we were in the Da Nang area, but everybody was overloaded, and if we could spare an aircraft, we would go and try to augment one of these other places.
During Tet, I mean, were you going throughout I-Corps, or was there a particular area?
No, we were, mainly our area deal was the Da Nang up to Phu Bai, all the way down to Chu Lai. We had the Korean Marines that we worked with too, plus our Marines, all the way to the border. But like I was saying, is if they were short and they had emergency going on, they would send us up. And so we flew all the way up to the DMZ, over to the border, Quezon. We did the hills around Quezon.
Wow.
The squadrons that are up there were doing a fantastic job. We were just coming in to try to augment them. Same thing about Way. That was a mess too, but but again, the local squadron was taking most of that, and if they
but
were
you
short.
did fly. You did do some missions, a couple missions into Way, a couple into Quezon.
Well, the hills around Quezon.
The hills around.
861 north and south, and 950 and 10 something or other. But anyway, the hills around Quezon. I was supporting a company, I guess. We were staying at their outposts and stuff, and then when we get called, we go out and either supplies or a medevac and stuff. And we got called for Vietnamese medevac. The Vietnamese had a hospital there in Da Nang, and then we would take the Vietnamese farmers or whoever and stuff in. And a little girl, 7, 8 years old, had stepped on a road mine that the VC had put in the road and had blown off her leg, and she just had some of her femur sticking out. So normally we went over and we landed by the road, and they put her and her family on the back of the bird, and I always kind of look back to see what I've got back there. And this girl was holding her leg. Her eyes were just huge, and she was yelling and screaming. But it was just, what always struck me was why. I don't know if that's what she was thinking or not, but it was just kind of like, why?
Oh, you mean in her mind?
Yes.
Was like, why did this?
I mean, that's what I was reading, and just I'm going. She goes, why? So that's one that kind of sticks with me. We took her and got her and her family to the Vietnamese hospital. I do not know the outcome of that at all or anything. But that just kind of, I mean, here it is. It's all the way down to not just soldiers fighting one another, but you got little kids.
Little kids.
And the bad guys didn't care.
Stuck in it. And now you mentioned that this was near the end of your tour. But you have all sorts of, tough experiences. And, it amazes me, that you're operating these complicated machines in the first place. Then you're operating these complicated machines under such stressful conditions. And you have to get up and do it day after day after day after day. And, you have these kinds of experiences. I'm sure you had some missions after this one that you just described. But, this happens and you get rattled maybe somehow, but you just have to get up the next day and go back at it, right?
Yeah.
So, what's the strategy? Some guys did crack up. Some guys did crack up. What prevented you from, what made it possible for you to keep going?
You didn't want to disappoint. We had a fantastic CO. You did not want to disappoint him. Did not want to disappoint the crew chiefs. The crew chiefs, you wanted to look good in the eyes of the crew chief. I
like that, because this is the officer who wants to look good in the eyes of the enlisted guy.
We wanted to be in their eyes. If we lost the respect of a crew chief, that was just like a dagger in the back.
Really? Wow.
And what made us do it? It was a job is the wrong word to use, but that's kind of like it's a job to use. There was times if I knew what I was fragged for. Frag is order for the day, type thing. And if it was like on recon and I knew it was a bad situation stuff, I physically would get sick. I would, before we, climb in the bird and stuff, I'd be off the side throwing up a little bit.
Really?
But you strap in. It's training.
Yeah.
Everything starts taking place. Your mind's occupied with what you're having to do.
Yeah.
And there's some humorous times too in the bad situation and stuff.
Yeah.
And and I kind of would have to say, better that I'm where I'm at than being where these guys are, because the ground pounders, That's what it was all about, supporting them. You get 18, 19-year-old kid on the radio. He's trying to call in the medevacs. He's scared, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Some of them are very, very calm. Some of them were scared. You'd have to talk to them to try to get you good directions and stuff from them, and try to talk to them. The recon teams.
Yeah.
I mean, these recon teams. An example of what these guys went through. I mean, we put them back in the boondocks. They were not supposed to be compromised by anybody and stuff.
They're out there looking for the enemy to report back, right?
Report back, or they could even call artillery in if they could see them on a far trail and stuff. And these guys, we always knew we'd make a contact with them, and the only team I can remember call sign was Green Reefer. And was going to extract them. It was time for them to be extracted out. And we go, Green Reaper, Bonnie Sue. And Bonnie Sue was our call sign. And it'd be quiet. And you go, Green Reaper, Bonnie Sue. And you go, Bonnie Sue, Green Reaper.
Wow.
And you're going, oh no. Which means they were that close to the bad guys that they could not talk loud. And you know, I talked to some of those guys. They said they'd go get under bushes at night and stuff, wake up the next morning, and the NVA would be camped around them. You know, like I'm saying, they had to stay there all day long and stuff. But these guys were professionals. They were very good. They were young kids.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is, I mean, you know, you get the mission, you know it's going to be bad. You know, throw up in the field and then get your bird, but. You know, part of the way you deal with it is by taking your mind off yourself and putting your mind on, like you said, that 19-year-old radio operator who's calling you saying we need a medevac, the reconnaissance guys, you know, what the CO needs, what the crew chief needs. Sounds like that's kind of what you're saying. One of the things that keeps you going.
Our job was support the guy on the ground.
Yeah.
That's the way I approached it, is whatever I could do to help that man, and or men or whatever. That's one of the, you can call it, I guess, an outpost of stuff, a little bit of a high ground. That's kind of a little bit elevated there. Probably a company-sized battalion, or not battalion, but a company-sized Marines. That's probably their main base that they operated out of. And that's their little landing zone. You can see the 46 sitting down there. We'd go in and resupply them there at that base, and or if they had medevacs, we could take the medevacs out at that place.
So the 46 is in that blue square?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's the landing zone?
Yeah.
Is that how you knew that's where the landing zone is?
It's usually Martian matting. If you're familiar with that, is what they make those things out of. And those were the non-lethal type missions going in there and stuff.
Now I see in the bottom of the photo, looks like a number of craters of some sort.
Yeah,
Any idea what that's about?
I would imagine those are for mortars. They would get mortared and rocketed quite often, and I would imagine that's probably where they fell short. And they could have been coming from the base too, with their counterattack.
Oh, okay.
Fixed wing jets doing ground support, dropping bombs, and that may have been even some napalm. I'm not too sure.
Wow.
In support of probably some fellas that's gotten some trouble and they needed a tree line taken care of. Close air support is what it's called.
Yeah. So you've got Army or Marines out there.
Yeah, those are probably Marines
out there. In a firefight, and they call in for help.
Right.
Yeah. And when the help is called for, is it just general, we need some sort of support, and then someone else decides whether it's air or Navy, or how does that work? Or will the officer on the ground make that call?
Again, I talked about Da Nang Dash, and that's who they would call. The Marines, and I guess the Air Force probably did too, they had pilots sitting in the
ready room or something?
No, they would actually be sitting in their birds. I'm trying to think, hot point, something or other.
Yeah.
Anyway, they would actually be sitting in their birds. They would be strapped in. They would have a power unit hooked up to them.
Wow.
And so if the call came in, and then you could get, there was times when I was trying to get a team out. I had Air Force and Marines stacked up, jets stacked up. The Ford Air Controller was in one of the Hueys, directing them, telling them where they needed to go,
Yeah.
and put their stuff. But we had a mixed bag,
Okay.
and had them stacked up.
What do you mean by stacked up?
Well, you'd get there, and so you'd already have a couple of planes working an area, and so you just stack the next one up here and another one on top of them, and then you'd bring them down each time these people got their ordnance all done with. Then you'd bring down the next two,
I see what you're saying.
and
yeah.
so you could stack them up there. That's an old, the plane is a C-47, the old Goonie bird from World War II. It had Gatling guns pointed out the side of it, and every sixth round was a tracer. So if you look at that, that's a solid stream right there, and between each one of those, there's 5 other rounds in between each one of those things there. Used for close air support. If an outfit was starting to get overran, they could call in, and it's called Puff, the Magic Dragon, and call him in, and he could do a lot of damage.
Wow.
Saved a lot of lives, a lot of people from being overran. Let's say you had, even like that compound we looked at a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
If they were being overran by mass quantities of the bad guys and stuff, they could come in and hose down the countryside and repel the attack. If you had a team out, let's say you had a squad out, 8 or 9 people out somewhere, and they were in the world of hurt, you could call these people in and stuff.
Wow.
And then there was a planes, Goonie bird type, same type of looking airplane, but it dropped flares, and it could light up like daylight, drop flares, and it looked like daylight. But if we were going in to pick up a recon team again or medevacs, instead of having them drop flares where we were, we would have them drop the flares over by a ridge line. And we could see from the shadows, we could see where we wanted to go and need to go.
Wow.
Because we didn't want to get lit up like a Christmas tree with a flare going off, and there we are, for God and everybody to see.
Sure, yeah.
And so those 2 birds were they're Air Force, and did a great job, and we utilized them a lot. If you can look closely, you can see where my gun's kind of pointed right there. There's a hole right there where we'd gotten hit just flying along Fat, Dumb, and Happy at altitude, and somebody got a lucky shot at us and hit us there. And we heard it when it hit us, but we didn't know what it was or anything until we got back to base, and we started looking the aircraft over, and there it was right underneath my seat, where that the entry hole right there.
Just some guy sniped you from the ground, and
they were shooting at us all the time. You didn't know when they were and when they weren't, unless it was like you could see the AK-47s had green tracers. And if it was a 51 caliber and an aircraft deal, it almost looked like aluminum beer cans flying past you.
Wow.
But that there, I'm assuming it was an AK because we were probably flying around 2,000, 2,500 AGL, and it was a lucky shot.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, let's shoot. We might get lucky.
Yeah. Did it penetrate and go through?
Yeah, it's an entry hole there. I do not remember where the exit hole was, but that's the entry hole right there.
Boy, there was an exit hole as well.
Yeah.
So did it go up right between the 2 of you?
I think it actually, when I remember when it happened, the helicopter has what's called a collective, and you can kind of see it in the window there, the thing that's at an angle. And it's called a collective, and I can't remember if I was flying or if George was flying, but you had your hand on the collective, and I can remember that it actually came up between my hand and the armored seat.
Between your hand and the arm of the seat?
Yeah.
So that's probably a pretty small space there.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what the smiles are all about. We were okay. You're going, like sitting at night, you'd be like in a zone, taking medevac out, and you're sitting there and you're waiting for them to load the medevacs out in the back, and you sit there and these green tracers are flying back and forth in the zone, you know, and you're sitting there and you're going, oh my gosh, you know, they're coming at me, they're straight at me and stuff. You think, and we would go back and then look for battle damage, and we couldn't see any battle damage.
Really?
And you know, it's kind of like, how did that happen? And there was other times where a single round like that would hit you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was, you know, it's kind of like a collage of things. And like I said, it's like taking out a recon team that was being overran, literally being overran, and you know there's supposed to be like 8 of them. And so you go and you drop your ramp, and you got the Huey guns flying around, and you got our 50s going, and the recon teams, they run in and they put our windows were gone, and they'd be what's called stagecoach. They'd be shooting out the windows and stuff. And the crew chief says, okay, we can go. And you'd go, okay, give me a count. And he says, we got 7. And you're going, oh no, no. And then he goes, okay, we're okay, miscounted. There's 8, you know, button up, and away we would go.
Wow.
And you know, so you know, there's just you sit there a lot of times, and you just sweating it out, you know, so everybody gets on.
Well, that's what I mean. This is the question I have, because you know the guys who are loading the helos, they're busy, they're occupied, you know, and they've got something to do. But I guess for those minutes, couple minutes, however long it is, you're just sitting there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, how do you hold it together? I mean, it's an unanswerable question, I realize, you know, but it just mystifies me. I mean, you know, if you're busy doing something, then I can kind of understand, but at that moment, you know, you're going to be operating this machine pretty soon, and that keeps you occupied, but at this moment, you're just sitting there.
Well, your mind's always going, you know. I mean, you're looking to see where the fire's coming from, and the crew chief and the gunners are pretty good. They can see where fire's coming from, but if you can see it, you can call out where it is from the bird and stuff. Yeah. You're watching, you see the bad guys coming. There's been times where, well, you're sitting there, I mean, the co-pilot's even shooting out the window.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, were you able to yourself engage the enemy during those minutes?
And, well, if the pilot, he would stay on the controls, even while you're sitting in the zone. And, but, you know, you see them coming, you do what you did. And,
so you could open your window and...
Yeah, we had a little sliding window there. And do rat-a-tat-tat. Yeah. But it was, you know, like I said, we called stagecoach. You'd have all the recon team shooting out the windows and stuff and things, and the gunners are going. And
wow, that's so. Just to go back to this photo, so I see that you're holding a weapon there. I don't recognize what that is.
That is a Thompson submachine gun with the stock off of it. Does not have the stock, and that's 2 clips taped together. And that shot 45 rounds, 45 caliber rounds is what that shot.
Yeah.
Good weapon.
And is that what you had with you a lot of the time?
Yeah, that was it. Okay. Everybody kind of had their own. When I first got there, I think I had an M14, and it's big and it's bulky. Some of the guys had shotguns, sawed-off shotguns and stuff. I traded that out to a ground pounder, got the Thompson, and it would stand between my seat and the door. It would fit perfectly right there. Fred and I was aircraft commander. Fred was the co-pilot. The same day that we medevaced that little Vietnamese girl, same day we medevaced her, and we got her to the hospital, and then we were coming back to where the battalion was that we were supporting, and we got called in for emergency medevac. Okay. And it was south of Marble. Most of the railroad lines are kind of like elevated and stuff, and where we were picking up the medevacs were down low between that. And it was a couple of them, and we made it in okay. I called again. You make your initial contact. You try to find out where the good guys, bad guys are, so you can tell your gunners where where they can fire, where they can't fire, and they said they had patrols out everywhere, and there was bad guys everywhere, but the good guys were everywhere, so we couldn't return fire. And I told my gunners, I said, you can return fire if you absolutely see exactly where it's coming from. You can do that. And so anyway, we picked them up. We took fire going in. We're okay. We're coming out, and we were taking fire from all different directions and stuff. And I kept trying to turn away from the fire where it was coming from. And I had it in a really tight turn coming out, and the centerpiece of the windshield exploded. And we took rounds right through that thing. In fact, it was such a fast thing, I thought we took in an airburst, is what I thought we'd had taken. Yeah. And my first call was I called in the back, and I said, everybody okay back there? And they said, yes, we're okay. And I said, well, check us and make sure there's nothing wrong there. And I looked over at Fred, and he had some shrapnel wounds, nothing bad. Neither one of us were bad and stuff. And kind of give it a little history here. When you took people to the aid station or to the hospital, they strip them. And the reason why is you only hurt what you see.
Right.
So you could have an arm wound and think that's where it is, and they strip them down, they'd have like a big trunk wound and stuff. So that's in my head, and so I had some shrapnel, blood and stuff and things, but nothing bad. And so I said, Fred, you okay? And he goes, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, well, I was looking at this thing, and I'm going, man, that looks like that's right at me, where these holes came out, and because it was kind of like this. And said, he said, yeah, and I said, well, go ahead and take it. So I'm over there, and I'm trying to see that, and I turn around, and I couldn't see the impact point behind me. And I'm going, man. So I'm going, maybe I'm dead. And I'm in the next dimension and don't know it, what it is. So I'm sitting there, and we had these bullet
patches. Did you really have
on.
a thought?
I did. I thought I was dead, and I was trying to feel, and I couldn't see anything. And I had my visor up, and I couldn't see anything, and I was feeling the top of my head. Fred goes, he says, Bear, what are you doing? And I said, Fred, I think I'm hit, but I don't know it.
Wow.
He says, why? And I said, I can't find the impact. And he said, well, they're right behind you. And when we got back to the base, we took the medevacs in, and then we went back because we was going to get another bird. That bird was going to be down. Our CO and the operations officer met us in the Jeep and took us down to sick bay. And the flight surgeons scraped out the little bit of shrapnel and stuff, and sewed and patch you up and pat you on the butt and get back in there. We were doing a troop insert, and it was in tall elephant grass. I was flying, I was a co-pilot on the left-hand side, and we had landed in the elephant grass, and probably 25, 30 feet away, his NVA stands up, and he has his AK-47, and he's, right at me. Wow. And it looked like it was at me. And so I was trying to get on the ICS to the gunner to tell him, I said, 10 o'clock, and before I even said 10 o'clock, the guy's head exploded. The gunner saw him. Our 50s hit him. Our 50s were an amazing fire suppressor.
Sure,
they did good work. But anyway,
that's one of those instances where a half a second makes a difference. So I was going to ask, was this one of your life passes before your eyes moments? But it sounds like you kind of reacted real quick and.
Yeah, it's things happen so fast. I don't think you have time to have your life going. Now, if you were having time lapse in there. You would have time for stuff like that to kind of happen to you and stuff. Yeah. But this stuff's so fast that all you're doing is your training kicks in. That's just can't say enough about training. Train. Yeah. And so you're doing everything training-wise. Your mind's going 90 miles an hour. You're making decisions in microseconds.
So what about you see the NVA guy, he's got his AK on you, the 50 cal gets him. I mean, is there just a little pause like, wow, or is just like right on to the next thing?
Well, in that instance, I mean, there was still just gunfire going everywhere. So, I mean, it wasn't time to say there was this nice, quiet, peaceful time. I mean, that happened.
Yeah.
He just, gunner went on to another target. The crew chief's off to another target. You had, you know, the other birds are doing the same thing. We're getting our troops off,
Sure.
trying to get our troops off and get as many troops in the zone as you can get.
Have flying missions about 5 days a week, and then other work 2 days a week. Those 2 days when things are maybe a little quieter, is that when some of this stuff would kind of, you know, you'd kind of reflect on them a little bit, or still just like, I'm not going to deal with this stuff right now?
Yeah, it's kind of like what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what if I was just a half a knot slower or a half a knot faster? Where would that round have been?
The one that broke
if I'd have been
the glass
a
on the heel.
tad less on an angle, and you know, and we had close calls just landing and stuff. You know, if it had been just that much more. One of the times I was coming back from Arville, down there was a Jeep, and my corporal was driving and on the road, and then all of a sudden there's just like a puff out there, and it was a spent 50 caliber that had been shot at us from out somewhere, and I'm going, okay, if it had been 1 mile an hour faster, you know, so you can go crazy on the what ifs. The country itself was actually a very pretty country, and as you have been there,
Sure,
and you know what it's like. You go back in some of these valleys and stuff. That there is right during the monsoon season. You can see how the clouds hang so low and stuff, and everything's wet and stuff. You get way back, especially up around the Quezon area. You get back in some of those valleys back there, and you could come across the old temples and stuff, kind of like out of the book, was it Jungle Book or what it was, and the vines growing over everything and stuff. And we'd fly by and look at them and stuff. Like I said, it's a beautiful country, and the people kind of have to understand the people. That's all they've known their whole entire life is war. So once you understand that, I enjoyed the people that I worked with. It's almost like two different types of people: the people that fought against, and the people that not fighting with them.
Yeah.
And
sure.
So.
And of course, you know, you're dealing with North Vietnamese Army, but also Viet Cong.
Correct.
Here's one of your photos from the war, and do you happen to remember where this was?
That's just south of Marble Mountains themselves.
Okay.
I was the last couple of months, few months, I was over there. I was what's called our civic action officer, and as part of the winning the hearts and minds of the people type thing.
Right.
These little villages would have what's called, I think they're called cat teams. They would have 3 or 4 Marines that actually lived with them and stuff.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this.
And this particular village, we were trying to, in fact we did, we picked up a project for them to earn money, which was actually going through our metal scrap area and reselling it. I would keep the money and then donate the money, not donate, but delegate the money out, and they built a dispensary and what's called a public school for them there.
Yeah.
And because you didn't want to give them all the money at one time, because, like, again, they've been at war all this time and grafts, and they wouldn't have the money and stuff, so just enough to go every day.
Yeah.
We did very well. This village was very well. They put the MVA put a bounty on my gunny sergeant and me's heads. We had a bounty on our heads.
Wow.
When the dispensary in the school was completed, they came through. They, as the MVA, came through and told the villagers that if you utilize this stuff, we will come in and kill your whole family.
Good.
And we put what's called the PFs, the Popular Forces, which is kind of like our National Guards, around it to keep it, you know, protected and stuff.
Yeah.
They did blow up my Jeep one time. I wasn't there. My Lance Corporal lost a forearm from it. But again, the people, I think, saved everybody on that when we had our flight squadron down there and stuff. And we had what's called a med calf, that once a week the flight surgeon and a corpsman would go down to the village and hold a sick call if you want for anything different than that.
Sure.
And that particular day, they basically kept them there longer than what they normally would be kept there. They just kept bringing people in and basically dragging their feet and kept them longer than longer.
See, yeah.
So if they'd have left when they normally would have left and gotten the Jeep, they would have gotten blown up all in the Jeep. The Jeep didn't blow up until they were actually just leaving the building,
Wow.
the dispensary.
So the locals probably knew.
They did. They
about
know.
this.
They know. And
Wow.
they, without them saying anything and them getting into trouble, that's the only way they knew about how to save the
Yeah.
Americans that were trying to help them.
Were you confident that you could trust the folks? For example, I'm looking at that fellow there in the white there. I mean, could you trust that he isn't working with the
I'm
VC?
sure that, I mean, there was VC in there.
Yeah.
I did. But when they came out with bounty on Gunny and myself
Yeah.
and stuff, I went down and spent a night down there just to show, I was very scared,
Mhm.
but just to show, that you can't do that. You
Yeah.
can't bully these people.
Mm.
And so they, they were there and stuff, but I think
Yeah.
maybe there was enough of the good people there that's saying, no, you're not
Sure.
going to mess with these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Sounds like it.
they had what's called a chief, which is like a mayor. They had a police chief,
Mhm.
and they blew up his house and killed him and one of his kids.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they were active in the area.
Wow.
When we were having the dedication of the dispensary, they had a little dinner for us type stuff, and my corporal found in his trigger guard on his rifle a little propaganda thing. That was a North Vietnamese propaganda against Johnson and the bombing and stuff.
Wow.
And he never knew when it got slipped in there or
Wow.
anything. So, I mean, they were among us. I'm guessing anywhere from 9 to 10 years old. I used him as my interpreter. He could speak French and English, and of course the native Vietnamese language.
Wow.
And typical 9 or 10-year-old kid, smiling, joking around, wanted to kid with you and everything.
Mm.
But if I needed to talk to any of the people in the village and stuff, I would go through him. And
Wow.
did a great job. Often wondered what became of him. I hope he made it. Smart kid.
How long was he with you?
Maybe 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was just a local kid who
Yeah.
attached himself to you
Yeah,
guys?
and I don't even know if his parents were alive or not. He just was
Really?
there. Yeah, he was there when I'd come in. He'd be there,
Wow.
and
He'd just show up?
Yeah.
And,
and
wow.
and so and we'd give him candy or something or other and stuff.
Mm.
But I think he really liked being able to be the interpreter. I really do, because he's
Well, it's a big job.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a big job for a 10-year-old.
That part of that village, the hamlets, I had several different hamlets. That particular one was rice paddies. I had one that was a fishing village more out on the coast and different things, but that was more of a farming deal there.
Yeah. Did you feel that it was ever possible really to establish kind of a working relationship with local Vietnamese, or was there always the concern that maybe the VC maybe these are VC? I guess I'm partly getting at the question of trust. I mean, aside from that boy, did you feel like there were some you really could trust to work with you?
You could.
Yeah.
They would tell us, sometimes they would tell us where the VC were.
Wow.
And stuff and things. But I think they were pretty smart. They would do just enough to keep themselves out of trouble,
Right.
but enough to
Yeah.
keep us out of trouble.
Yeah.
And so they walked a pretty fine line and stuff. But given everything being equal, I think I trusted them. Not all of them, but
Yeah, sure.
or I should say maybe I trusted them with my eyes wide open. I don't know.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you just get the feeling a lot of these folks are just walking a tightrope, aren't they?
Yeah. The Korean Marines were down in that area. When I first got there, they were south of Chulai, and then they moved their area of operation up to just south of the Da Nang area and stuff.
Okay.
basically they're crazy.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Yeah.
But they
What do you mean by
they
that?
were fun to work with,
Yeah.
but they were completely no nonsense type of people as far as an NCO and a private. I mean, they didn't think anything of knocking them on the ground if they needed to get their attention and
Oh,
stuff.
really? Wow.
And
So some old school discipline there.
yeah, and it's a little sidebar. One day when they had like outposts at different places, and we'd
Yeah.
do the resupply for them or take out their medevacs. And we was in there one day, and they had a kid, not a kid, one of the Marines was tied to a post
Wow.
up there, and people would come up to him and they'd shake their head and pat him on the head, and they'd shake their head, walk away. And it was about our third time in there, and I called up the Anglo, which was the American liaison between us and the radio deal. I said, "What's the story over here on this?" You know, I said, "Well," I said, you may be taking his body out of here tomorrow." I said, "What?" I said, "Well, he had a pet monkey, and his pet monkey bit another Korean. That Korean killed the monkey, so he killed the guy."
Oh,
You know, and I'm just going, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to hear any more." You know.
so the word was they were going to execute this guy for
Yeah. And
killing the other
that's
Marine.
Yeah, it's
who-
going to give him a quick, probably a quick court martial.
boy.
And
Do you know how that story played out?
No, I do not.
You don't
I,
know how that story
and I,
played out?
did- you know, I don't know. But,
I've heard that the ROK troops, the South Korean troops, didn't have a whole lot of use for things like the Geneva Conventions and
No.
rules of war and things like
No.
that. When you were doing operations with them, was it just understood that the ROKs they'll do things their way and we'll do things our way, and
Mhm.
we're just not gonna
and then
we're just
and
gonna
I,
let that be?
Yeah, they, yeah, they maintained a certain kill ratio. We won't go into that either.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that sometimes you had to explain things to them. There was times where their radio operator, which was American, would be talking to us, and they were saying, "Would you please come down here, land down here." And, "What do you got?" It says, "Well, I've got a rifle pointed at me," and said that if I don't get you guys down here, they're going to shoot me. And all they wanted was a taxi service, move us from one spot to another spot. And we're going, how are we going to work with this one?
Yeah.
So I said, "We'll
Wow.
land, you get on our bird, and we're going to get you out of there."
Really?
And we had to
Yeah.
do that a couple of times and stuff,
Yeah.
because they had no concept. They just thought that we were their personal taxis and
Really?
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're allies, but it sounds like maybe kind of allies at arm's length. Is that
Yeah.
kind of?
Well, I
they'll
think that's
do
the-
what they do in their world, and
I think that's the only way they understand how things work
Yeah.
is by threats.
okay.
And as I think is
At
what
that
they.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had them do the same thing. My crew chief, they'd come on and we'd be at their main little place picking up a supply to go someplace, and they would draw a weapon on my crew chief this one time and said, and of course he came up on the intercom, my crew chief did, and says, I've got a problem back here in the back, and I asked him what it was.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, this guy's threatened to shoot me if we don't take him to see his friend at another place."
Oh,
And I
boy.
said, "Well, hold on." And I called the liaison person.
Yeah.
I said, "I'm shutting down in the bird, and you get some people over here." I said, "We're not going anywhere."
Yeah.
So I shut the bird down, so we couldn't move, we couldn't go anywhere or anything. The Arvins, that's just an interesting thing. When you go to move all the Arvins, you're moving the family, you're moving pigs, geese, and everything else. They just all went en masse and stuff. Didn't really have a good leadership program, because most of these people were just like us, were draftees and stuff. I mean, they were just coming in and just draft them and take them out and stuff. Their Arvin Air Force was very good. We had some go through flight school with us down in Pensacola. So I guess because only the good survived through flight school.
Mm.
And so if they made it through flight school,
Yeah.
they were very good in
They're
what they
pretty
did there
solid.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Worked with the Australians. Crazy people,
Mhm.
the Australians are, and they were
Yeah.
salt of the earth. I loved working with them.
Mm.
They would work with the mercenaries, the nuns, and the I can't remember what the other ones was, but Mountain Yards and nuns and stuff.
Montagnards,
They
yeah.
lived with them and stuff.
Wow.
And these guys were, I mean, they were They were fun people.
Sort of the ethnic minorities within Vietnam
Yeah.
who
Mhm.
also allied themselves
Yeah.
with you guys.
And so the Aussies were very, very good. My first night home, actually home, went to bed that night, and I couldn't go to sleep. And I'd get up and I'd walk around, and then I'd go back to bed, and I'd go, something's not right.
Yeah.
And after I did that about 3 times, I noticed that between me and my door was where my luggage was. And I'm going, for 13 months, you had nothing between your rack and the door, because if you got hit that night, you had to get out to the bunker.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, I mean, it wasn't registering on me till I saw that, and I moved it, and I went back, I got in bed, and I went to sleep. They didn't want to listen to us when we came back.
They meaning the
They
Veterans
is everybody.
Administration,
I mean,
oh,
everybody.
right, sure.
You know, they go, somebody, friends, family, stranger, doesn't matter. And they go, well, tell me about Vietnam. And you're going, well, what do you want to know? So, well, just tell me about it. And you start, and they go, gee, look at the time, I have to go. I mean, they didn't want to talk to you. They didn't want to hear it. We didn't want to share it. We got to the point, it's hard to explain, but we're going, they're not worthy of us telling them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're not worthy.
I mean, kind of the don't throw your pearls in front of swine kind of thing.
And so we went many, many, many years before they actually realized that we have problems, and they started trying to help us. But we're talking 30, 40 years before they even came to that realization. I think I'm probably the norm of people that are still there. I mean, literally every day, and literally every night, and literally every experience that happens relates to something. It's kind of like a record, and you're stuck in the 60s in that groove.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is.
68.
And and I told you, just like flying and driving. And, I'm driving here in town, or going to Fayetteville or whatever. I see the tree lines, and I start going to the map of the earth. I'm flying stuff. If there's a storm, I'm going back to when we had storms and we were still going out into it. When my mom passed away 3 years ago in St. Louis, and got a call in the middle of the night, said, if you want to, see her before she passed away, get up here. And I was in the middle of the night in my truck, and there was storms ahead, the lightning and everything and stuff, and I was on my way to a medevac.
Wow.
All the way up there, all 6 hours was on my way to a medevac.
Wow.
And then that's the way, and I don't think I'm alone in this. And the other people have made wonderful adjustments.
Sure.
And
yeah.
Anyway.
If I had if I could say I've found this magical potion, and if you drink it, all of that goes away, would you take it?
No.
You'd keep it?
It would not. It's an interesting deal, because I brought that up one time. I said, if there was a way they could give you a shot or something, and it never happened, and would you do it? And majority of the people said no, they would not. In my case, I'm going, I hate to keep dwelling on the people that aren't here, but it's kind of like, I don't want them forgotten. I mean, oh, too bad, you're gone, forget you. No, I don't want to dwell on them. I want to go on with my life. But I think it'd be a disservice if I forgot them. Christopher was a cousin on my dad's side. I did not meet Christopher. He was from Mangum, Oklahoma. He was 19 years old when he was in the Marine Corps. And he checked into Vietnam May 1 of 1968. And it was either May 18th or May 19th, somewhere in there. He was killed over there. He was only there 18 days. And he was on the road just south of Hill 55. And I checked my logbook and to see what I was doing on that day, and I was flying and supporting the units around Hill 55 and out of Hill 55. So, and I was doing medevacs, and I was taking out the KIAs also that day. And I've often wondered, maybe I took Christopher's body out, and I've always feel like I did, because it's family helping family.